to Chestnut Square in McKinney, Texas. Chestnut Square is a living history museum. We own 10 historic buildings, including the oldest house in McKinney and the 2 Delaney houses, which were crucial to McKinney's founding. You're going to see 5 of those houses today, which depict early life in McKinney, Texas, and the surrounding area.
We're now at the Faris House, which is the oldest house in McKinney and built in 1854. This house was built by John Faris, who owned and operated a blacksmith shop, built bridges, and furniture and cabinets. His products improved the lives of the citizens in McKinney and Collin County. Bridges over creeks and rivers improved travel to this area. He helped transform the landscape of McKinney and Collin County from a rural community to a progressive and important town. This room is known as the parlor. The parlor is the name for what we would call the living room now. The furniture in this room would be similar to what the family owned. The railroad had not come through McKinney yet, and these pieces would have been too big for a stagecoach. Mr. Faris would have made many of the items the family used. Before glass windows, the lace curtains would have been used in the warmer months to allow a breeze to enter the house but keep insects out. This is known as a courting candle. This candle would be used as a sort of timer for the father to know how long a daughter was being courted for an appropriate amount of time. In other words, once the candle ran out, it was time for your boyfriend to go. This room holds furniture that was brought by covered wagon from Ohio. Many large pieces of furniture were designed to come apart so it would fit in a wagon. Okay. On cold nights, you wouldn't want to go to the outhouse, so you would have to use the chamber pot. Most houses at this time had no closets, so they used armoires instead. The kitchen was used for cooking and warmth. Children would even sleep on the floor next to the fireplace to keep warm. The fireplace was used until 1872, when a stove was able to be brought with the railroad. The S-hooks hanging on the iron arm allow you to cook different foods at different temperatures. The cream separator is from the 1920s. To operate it, you'd milk the cows and pour the milk in the separator. Turn the handle and the cream would come out one spout and the milk would come out of the other. They really had to work for both their milk and their butter. Mrs. Faris did her fair share of work as well. She took the cotton the family raised and cleaned it with these carders, spun it into yarn, dyed it with roots and berries, and wove it into cloth. This cloth would have been used to make clothing and other household items.
Welcome to the Two-Bit Tailor Inn. This house was built in 1863, and Armistead and Tabitha Taylor purchased it in 1868, and they turned it into an inn for traveling salesmen. Mr. Taylor was a carpenter, and he built cabinets and fine furniture and also walnut coffins for the people here in McKinney. He was a great businessman, and his ideas and his innovations attracted people to come live here in McKinney. Now we're in the Taylor's living room, and the Taylors had 7 children when they moved down here from Tennessee, and the whole family would sleep in this room. Of course, the mother and father would sleep in the bed, and if you were lucky enough to be a young child and you would actually get a bed or a cradle, otherwise you would be sleeping on the floor. The Taylors had a separate entrance for the salesmen, or the drummers, as they were called back in that time, because they would come to town to drum up business. And that door would lead them straight upstairs into the sleeping quarters. And we have a picture of what the sleeping quarters looked like on the wall. The bathtub in the middle of the room is where the men would take their baths. It's a little bit different than the Holiday Inn that we stay in today. And all of the men would sleep in one room upstairs. As I mentioned, Mr. Taylor was a furniture maker and a carpenter. This is one of the original cabinets that he built for his wife in the 1870s. It has lasted all this time, and it is the only piece of original furniture, so it is a true artifact that is here in the Taylor Inn. This is a picture of Miss Tabitha Taylor, and she is sitting in front of the cabinet, and you can come see this picture when you get a chance to come visit Chestnut Square. This is Mrs. Taylor's kitchen. This is where she would prepare the meals for all of her family and the drummers that would stay here at the inn. Mrs. Taylor would also offer laundry service, And as a child, you would probably have to help her do this because she was so busy taking care of everybody. So you would take the laundry and put it in a big bucket of boiling water. And then you would take this, and this is an agitator, and it works just like your agitator in your washing machine at home. And it would get all the clothes and soap mixed together. Then, if there was anything really tough to get off, you would have to use a washboard. You would take the clothes and you would be very careful because this would hurt your knuckles, and you'd rub the clothes to get the stain off. Then you would have to take the clothes and wring them out and hang them outside on a laundry line. Another option, as opposed to wringing them out by hand, is that you would put them in this, and this would wring out all of the excess water so that you could hang them up and they wouldn't make your clothesline droop too much. This is a dining area where the guests would come and eat their meals, and Mrs. Taylor and her children would serve them. This is also the dining room where the Taylors would take their meals separate from the guests. Welcome to the Wilmuth Schoolhouse. This is a replica schoolhouse that was built on the grounds of Chestnut Square in 2004. It is named after J.B. Wilmuth. He was the original schoolmaster at the Wilmeth Schoolhouse. Mr. Wilmuth was a really big believer in public education, and he believed that all children should get an education. So if you were to come to the school, you would come from about 3 miles away and you would walk. And you would have to bring your lunch, and this is where you would eat your lunch. Your recess would be taken outside. That was your gym. The one school teacher would be teaching 1st through 7th grade, and 7th grade was the end of your schooling here in the schoolhouse, and you would graduate. And if it was time for you to graduate, you would go to the courthouse, take an exam. It took about 5 hours, and then you would be finished with your schooling. And if you wanted to go on, you would have to discuss that with your parents, and they would have to find a secondary school for you to go to, or you would apprentice with a blacksmith or a carpenter, or you would go back to your farm and help your family with the family farm. Education was very important, and since it was free, and since there was only one school teacher, and she was teaching many different subjects, she would be teaching math and a foreign language, she'd be teaching reading, she'd be teaching the little ones how to do their ABCs. If a student was not doing their work or they came to school without their homework, sometimes the teacher would have them put on this nice dunce cap, which dunce means that you're not making good choices, and they would have to sit up on the stool with the dunce cap on their head, and the whole class would be able to watch them all day. And you can imagine if you went to class with your younger sibling, guess who would know that you wore the dunce cap in class that day? Your parents would know, because I'm sure your younger sibling would run home and tattle on you. Now, as you see up here on the board, above the board is a box, and that is a map box. And when that opens, there's maps in there that come down. And the reason it is in a locked box is because maps were very important back then, and they were very expensive. Not only because of the paper, but also because a lot of them were hand-drawn. And if you lost a map or someone stole it, or they ruined it in some way, you wouldn't have a map to teach your school by. So the teacher would have to come and open that map box every day and let the maps fall down, and then at the end of the day, they'd put it back up. As you can see in this room, there's one room that is missing that is very essential. Can you tell what it is? Something that you would have to use every day? It is the restroom. There's no restroom in here. So if you came to school, how would you be able to go to the restroom? Well, that is located outside in the outhouse. And if you come by Chestnut Square, you can come locate where the outhouse is and open it and see exactly what the restroom looked like back in the 1890s.
Welcome to the Dulaney Cottage. The Dulaney Cottage was built in 1875 by Dr. Joseph Delaney for his new wife, Lucy. This cottage originally stood where the Delaney House now stands, but was moved from the corner lot in order for the big yellow house to be built. This door is original to the house and is called a Four Seasons door. Each color represents one of the seasons. These are examples of calling cards. Calling cards would have been used as a way to leave a note to show that you visited someone. They're sort of like voicemail used today. If you visited Mrs. Delaney while she was not at home, you would leave a card so she would know that you wished to see her. And if you notice at the bottom down here, people would leave the name of eligible daughters who might be available for marriage. This stove is an example of one of the benefits of having a railroad come through McKinney. Something as heavy as this would never have been able to be transported by wagon all the way from Missouri. These bowls were placed at the bottom of the kitchen table legs and filled with water so that insects would get trapped in the water instead of climbing up to the kitchen table surfaces. The furnishings in this room were shipped to the Delaneys via the railroad. The process would have taken months. This room, the kitchen, and the bedroom were original to the house. The parlor, the front bedroom, and upstairs were added later. The quilt on the bed is known as a crazy quilt. It's made out of scraps of outgrown clothes and was a way that women would recycle fabrics. This room is a replica of what a doctor's office would have looked like. Dr. Delaney himself did not practice medicine inside of his home, but he was a surgeon in the Confederate Army. Usually people would have to come to a doctor's house to visit a doctor. The bed is original to the house. The medical bag on the desk belonged to Dr. Delaney himself.
This is the 1916 Delaney House, built for Lucy Field Delaney by her brother, John Field. John Field was a Dallas banker, and Lucy was a young widow with 2 small children when this house was built. Her brother built this house to live in it with her, but unfortunately he died shortly before the house was finished. We're going to go inside and look at modern conveniences circa 1916. Lucy Delaney's children grew up in this house. Neither one of them ever married, and both of them died living and working in McKinney. This house is appointed with some beautiful fixtures, including all original pocket doors, ceiling coffers. And this house also boasts original fireplaces and bookcases. Joseph Delaney Jr. was a pharmacist in town over at Smith Drugs. And when we go upstairs, you'll see some of the Smith Drug paraphernalia that was in the house when the house was restored. This house is appointed with pearl switch button light fixtures, which were new at the time. This is one of the first houses in the city with electricity. This house is also appointed with speaking tubes, which is what we would call an intercom system today. But since ladies didn't yell at the time, they would speak into the speaking tubes and the children upstairs could be called to dinner. This is the most modern kitchen that Mrs. Delaney had ever owned, including the icebox and the cooktop. So an icebox would hold big blocks of ice that the iceman would come and deliver. The order would be placed in the window, and you can see this order is for 50 pounds of ice. You could take no ice, 25 pounds, or 75 pounds of ice, and that would keep your food cold. You might notice that the countertops are slanted. They're that way on purpose. So when you were baking your bread or cutting up your vegetables, then you could just sweep the scraps down into the sink. Upstairs, we have 4 bedrooms. We also have a bathroom upstairs. Again, a rarity at this time frame. We're using a couple of the rooms for exhibits that are pertinent to the family or to the time period. Our communications room exhibits various methods of communications throughout time, including our Morse code machine right here, a variety of different phones. We have radios, a typewriter, and stamp sign making so that we can show communications throughout history. Joseph Delaney was a pharmacist at Smith Drugs in downtown McKinney. These displays come from the pharmacy before the pharmacy had closed, and he practiced for several years in McKinney. The Delaney family was also known because they donated the property for the first library.